On the evening of October 14th, the town of Willow Creek settled into its usual calm rhythm. Families gathered inside their homes, the streets emptied quickly after sunset, and the air carried the cool bite of autumn. In a quiet apartment complex on the edge of town, 24-year-old Emily Carter prepared for what should have been an ordinary errand. She slipped on a light jacket, grabbed her keys, and mentioned to her roommate that she was heading to the grocery store, just a few blocks away. She promised she would be back soon. There was nothing unusual about her leaving. The store was familiar, the route was short, and it wasn't uncommon for her to step out late in the evening. Yet, this ordinary trip marked the last time anyone would see her alive. Emily never returned home. Hours passed, and her roommate grew uneasy. Texts went unanswered, calls went straight to voicemail. By midnight, worry turned into fear. The following morning, that fear deepened when police discovered Emily's silver sedan parked on a desolate stretch of road only 2 miles from the apartment. The car was locked, the driver's seat pushed back as though she had exited calmly, and her belongings were still inside. Her purse rested on the passenger seat, untouched. Even her cell phone, which she never went anywhere without, lay powered down beside it. Nothing appeared stolen, and nothing was out of order. To investigators, it was as though Emily had simply stepped out for a moment and vanished into the night. What unsettled detectives most was the eerie stillness surrounding the vehicle. The road where the car was found was rarely used after dark, lined with tall trees and patches of thick brush. There were no footprints in the dirt nearby, no tire tracks except her own, and no witnesses who could recall seeing her stop there. It was as if the world had swallowed her whole. Friends and family rushed to the scene, their voices trembling as they begged for answers, but the evidence revealed nothing. Neighbors described Emily as dependable and careful, not the type of person to wander off without telling someone where she was going. The thought that she had disappeared without a trace defied logic. In just a few short hours, Emily's life had shifted from ordinary to mysterious, her absence sending shockwaves through Willow Creek. What began as a simple trip to the store had transformed into the beginning of a nightmare that no one in the town could have imagined. The unanswered question loomed over everyone: where had Emily gone? The investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance began at first light, with local police treating the case as a routine missing persons report. Within hours, however, it became clear this was no ordinary situation. Officers canvassed the area where her car had been found, searching the ditches, nearby woods, and even abandoned barns. Volunteers from the community poured in, forming search parties that combed through fields and riverbanks, calling her name again and again. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting across the landscape, while divers plunged into cold waters of the nearby river hoping for a clue. Each search ended in frustration, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. Attention quickly turned to her apartment and her personal life. Detectives interviewed her roommate, her family, and her co-workers. No one reported anything unusual in the days leading up to her disappearance. Emily had been cheerful at work, she had plans for the upcoming weekend, and she had spoken to her parents the very night she vanished. There were no signs of depression, arguments, or troubling relationships. Every detail suggested she had no reason to walk away from her life. Her bank accounts showed no suspicious withdrawals, and her social media activity stopped the moment she went missing. As the hours stretched into days, media outlets swarmed the town. Reporters lined the streets, cameras flashing as they broadcast updates to a nation suddenly gripped by Emily's mystery. For Willow Creek, a place where crime rarely made headlines, the sudden flood of attention felt unreal. Neighbors locked their doors earlier, parents kept children close, and whispers of fear spread quickly. People wanted to believe Emily was safe somewhere, but the longer she remained missing, the harder that belief became to hold on to. Then came the detail that unsettled even the most seasoned detectives. Reviewing surveillance footage from the grocery store, investigators saw Emily's silver sedan pull into the parking lot around 8:42 p.m. The camera captured her walking toward the entrance, carrying her phone and car keys. But from that moment, she seemed to disappear from the footage. No images showed her leaving through the exit doors. No cameras picked her up walking back to her car. It was as though she had stepped into the store and simply ceased to exist. For investigators, this discovery was both a breakthrough and a nightmare. It confirmed she had made it to the store, but it also deepened the mystery of where she went next. Months slipped by, and with each passing day, the sense of dread surrounding Emily Carter's disappearance only grew heavier. Leads dried up, tips from the public turned into dead ends, and investigators found themselves circling the same unanswered questions. Just when it seemed the case would fade into silence, a discovery reignited the investigation in a startling way. Detectives began comparing Emily's case with missing person reports from neighboring states, and unsettling similarities emerged. Young women, all between the ages of 20 and 25, had gone missing under eerily similar circumstances. Their cars were left abandoned, their belongings untouched, and not one of them had been found. The more investigators dug, the more disturbing the picture became. At least 4 cases across 2 states bore the same pattern. Families of these other missing women had lived for years with the same torment Emily's family now faced, waiting for answers that never came. What tied Emily to them was not only the method of disappearance, but also something even stranger, an odd marking left behind. When Emily's car was examined again, detectives noticed faint etchings on the rear window, lines that looked meaningless at first glance. But under closer analysis, the marks matched a peculiar symbol previously reported in 2 of the other cases. They had been almost invisible until condensation formed on the glass, making them stand out. The revelation sent a chill through the investigative team. Someone had intentionally left a calling card, a signature meant to be found only under certain conditions. The FBI was soon called in, treating the case as the possible work of a serial offender. Investigators speculated that Emily had been stalked before her disappearance. Her routines, work, errands, social outings, could have been studied carefully. The eerie precision of her abduction pointed to someone methodical, someone who knew how to move undetected. What troubled the task force most was that the predator seemed to take pleasure in taunting authorities, leaving behind cryptic clues that connected his crimes but revealed nothing about his identity. For Emily's family, the discovery brought little comfort. The idea that she was one of many victims only deepened their horror. Across the town, people who once thought her disappearance was an isolated tragedy now feared a predator was lurking among them. For the first time, the case was no longer about one missing woman. It was about a pattern of disappearances that hinted at something far more sinister. Just as investigators began to fear the case had reached another dead end, an unexpected clue surfaced in the most unlikely of places. A hiker exploring a remote forest trail stumbled upon a torn fragment of fabric caught on a low branch. At first, it seemed like nothing more than litter left behind, but when examined closely, the piece of material matched the distinctive sweater Emily had been wearing the night she vanished. Forensic testing confirmed the fabric belonged to her, and suddenly, a new path opened in the investigation. The discovery site was more than 50 miles away from her hometown, deep within an overgrown woodland that few people visited. The distance suggested deliberate planning, someone who wanted to mislead investigators or had chosen the spot for reasons only he knew. Search teams flooded the area, combing through the forest for additional evidence. They found no footprints, no discarded belongings, no body. The only trace of Emily was that single piece of fabric. What unsettled detectives further was the history of the land. The location had once been home to a family-owned campground, closed down years earlier after falling into neglect. The property had gained a dark reputation because of its former owner, a man who had served time for kidnapping in the late 90s. He had vanished after his release, disappearing without a trace himself. Many believed he had left the state, while others whispered he had simply melted into the shadows, waiting for another chance to strike. The connection was too eerie to ignore. Investigators revisited his old case files, reviewing every detail of his crimes, searching for patterns that could match Emily's disappearance. The similarities were alarming. His victims had been taken suddenly, their belongings left behind, and he was known for his obsession with control. Yet, even as suspicion mounted, no one could confirm his whereabouts. It was as though he had erased his identity, resurfacing only through the devastation left behind. The breakthrough came when evidence technicians examined the fragment of Emily's sweater more carefully. Hidden within the seam, tucked so neatly it might have been missed entirely, was a small silver key. It was plain, unmarked, and yet oddly deliberate. Investigators traced the key to a storage facility in a neighboring town, rented under a false name. The discovery sent a surge of adrenaline through the task force. Whatever secrets the unit held, they believed, could finally unravel the mystery that had haunted them for months. The discovery of the storage unit marked the most chilling turn in the case. Investigators moved quickly, obtaining a warrant and carefully prying open the rusted lock that had likely been untouched for years. Inside, the air was damp and stale, filled with the scent of dust and neglect. At first glance, the unit seemed ordinary, boxes stacked against the walls, a workbench pushed to one side, and shelves lined with old files. But as detectives began to sift through the contents, the horrifying reality revealed itself. Maps covered in ink markings detailed locations across multiple states, each corresponding with areas where young women had disappeared. Photographs, some faded and others recent, captured the faces of victims investigators recognized from unsolved cases. Each picture was neatly labeled with dates and notes, documenting their daily routines and patterns. What froze the team in place were the handwritten journals stacked in the corner. Page after page described meticulous surveillance, cold observations of women being watched as they shopped, jogged, or returned home from work. The tone was detached, almost clinical, as though the writer was cataloging prey rather than human lives. And then came the final entry, short and unnerving. Asterisk, Emily was different. She figured it out. Asterisk, the meaning was unclear, but it suggested she may have realized she was being followed before she disappeared. It hinted at a struggle, a resistance that perhaps set her apart from the others. The evidence confirmed the work of a calculating predator who had operated for years, possibly decades, with frightening precision. Yet, despite the overwhelming proof of his crimes, one critical piece remained missing: the man himself. No fingerprints were found, no DNA was left behind, and the rental records for the unit were linked to a false identity. Whoever had orchestrated these abductions knew how to cover his tracks and had vanished as effectively as his victims. Emily's body was never recovered. The clues suggested she had been transported far from her hometown, perhaps even moved repeatedly, but no conclusive trace of her final moments was found. Her family was left with only questions, haunted by the thought of what she endured and whether she had uncovered the predator's secret before being silenced. The case soon spread across national headlines, not only because of its disturbing details, but because it underscored the terrifying possibility that the perpetrator was still out there. Years later, the storage unit remains one of the most unsettling discoveries in American true crime history. To this day, Emily's disappearance is a reminder of how easily an ordinary night can spiral into a nightmare, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a shadow of fear that refuses to fade.